Okay, today I'm going to use my black Frederick's canvas pad, and this is 12 by 16. If you don't have a black canvas, you can absolutely paint a canvas with black paint or black gesso. Either one would work just fine for this. If you want to get crazy and do like a wild colored underpainting, that would be fine as well. Now, before we get started, I'm going to apply a grid to this canvas. Now, if you look at my reference image here, you see that I've already put a grid on it, and this is a 2-inch grid, meaning each one of these squares is 2 inches wide by 2 inches tall. And so that's what I'm going to do all across here. If you're new to gridding, check out the video description below because I'll have a link to my blog post where I go over that in depth, very, very detailed. So you shouldn't have a hard time adding a grid to your photo after that. Okay, so there I have the grid on my canvas, and just like my reference image, it's a 2-inch grid. So each square is 2 inches, exactly the same as on my image. And I forgot to mention that you can download this reference image with and without the grid in the video description below. My Patreon members are also getting a download with this grid in numerous shapes and sizes for different size of grids, but also with a simple tracing element just in case somebody really doesn't want to grid. So I have the reference image here on my phone, and I'm just going to start drawing the lines on my grid where I see them here. So for example, let's start right over here. See this square here with that tiny little corner through it? So basically I want to count down to the second square, because that's my top square, that's my second square. Find right about where it comes into the square, right about where it leaves, and draw a line through it. And it's really that simple, drawing from the grid. Now I know that a lot of people really don't like gridding, and I don't really understand why. I don't really know why some people prefer tracing over gridding. I think that gridding doesn't take any more time to do than tracing does. I get that complex images can sometimes be kind of confusing to grid, but once you get the hang of gridding and you know exactly where to start and kind of how to find a flow so that you don't get lost in the image, gridding is really just as easy as tracing. I'm not trying to be too precise here. I'm just generally getting these shapes in. Let's see, we've got our eyebrow right here. And I know that a lot of people are super resistant to gridding, because it's confusing to them or whatever. But I think, if ultimately doing more complex images, like perhaps portraits, is something that you think you might want to do someday, you really should learn gridding, because it will make more challenging images a little bit simpler. This is a pretty simple image to grid. See, I'm being really loose with it because it's a wrinkly elephant, so if my lines aren't in exactly the right place, it really doesn't matter. Let's see. In fact, that eye is it's over way too far into this grid. It ends really right about there. And this part comes down. I was talking and not paying attention. And then it kind of swoops down, starts to go into the trunk. Tracing is great. And I'm not saying that it's not valuable or that you should never do it. But what I'm saying is, I don't think that if learning is your goal, I don't think it's good to hobble yourself to only ever do tracing. Tracing can certainly kind of get you started, kind of getting the feel for drawing, but ultimately it's not going to teach you how to draw. But if you can get the hang of gridding, you could paint anything you want to paint. We have that little bit of eyebrow right there. And then right here, this is all really, it kind of fades into shadow, so I'm being really general with this line. That's why I'm being super sketchy with it, just so I remember this is not a hard line. This is just a shadow area. And that's really my elephant. It's that simple to grid. I think I am gonna bring the trunk in just a little farther than what's on the image though, just for my own preference. You know, just because it's one way on the image doesn't mean that you have to stick with that. You can change it however you want. Another thing I'm going to change about my image is when you look at it, there's not a lot of difference in value right where the trunk meets the body on the right side. So right in this area. In our image, it almost kind of blends in. But what I'm going to do is go a little darker here and lighter here. Likewise back here, I'm going to go lighter here and darker here, just so we get a real difference in those areas, and I might do that throughout here as well. All right, we're ready to start painting, and I'm going to use my 1/2 inch flat brush. I wet it in my jar pretty good, and I've got burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. If you don't have these colors, use any colors. You could just use black. You could use Payne's gray. I want to use these two colors because I know that I can shift it easily to a cooler gray or a warmer gray, but ultimately that's up to you. You could use burnt umber in place of burnt sienna. Just take a mixture that you like and use that. I'm going to mix them together and just get a pretty dark color. I don't care if it leans brown or blue. I'm just going for as dark as I can get. These two colors do make kind of a chromatic black. I also have matte medium, but it's not required. If you want to use it, that's great. If not, that's fine. Just going to put a tiny touch of white in there just so I don't lose it in the black of the canvas. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is start kind of laying in my darkest values. I'm really just going to come in and say that's going to be quite dark. And let's see, right here is quite dark. And see, those grid lines are helping me make sure that I'm putting my colors in the right place too. I know that I'm not just randomly choosing a place to put this color. I'm putting it in the same place relatively as in my reference image. I will have a fairly solid line here at this eyebrow. Quite dark here. It's going to blend into the background right there. Same all right here. So I'm just going to go over that line right now. I'll still be able to see it, and I'll come back and make it darker later. Kind of starting that side-to-side motion to give the illusion of those, you know, kind of wrinkles in the trunk. I'm not going to get crazy in there and, you know, start doing a bunch of little tiny lines. We're going to let it be a little bit more suggested, a little more impressionist. Got a bit of that dark color right in here, beneath that eyebrow bone. There's a bit in here. You can kind of experiment here, you know. Put down some of that dark color, and if you don't like it later, get rid of it. You're not stuck with anything at this point. All I'm doing is just kind of creating placeholders for my values. So when I come back and I see that color there, I know, oh, that's my darkest area. I want this to be nice and dark. And I am just kind of scrubbing and being pretty messy with it. No solid line here, it just kind of fades upwards. Okay, let's Let's go a little bit lighter. I'm just gonna grab a little bit more white and mix it in there. And if that's not light enough, we'll come back and lighten it up again. Let's do the same thing, kind of side to side. I'm not worried about covering all of the black in the background. If I do cover it all, that's great. If not, that's great. Doesn't matter. I'm just using the tip of my brush to get some of that color and some of that shape in there. Kind of this zigzaggy thing. Just the chisel edge of my brush. As we get up into here, that kind of starts to go away. We can just kind of scrub it in. Now, usually when I do a painting for you, I've done it a couple of times. I know what I'm going to do. But here, I don't really know exactly how I'm going to do all of this. So you'll get to see me experiment a bit. And this is not my lightest color, so I'm not really putting it everywhere. Just kind of some of those areas that are a little bit lighter than the darkest. A little more white. That color wasn't quite light enough. There we go. See how I like plop down and then the tip of the brush to just kind of break it up. Scumble it out a little. It's all about pressure. Heavy pressure lays it down. Light pressure breaks it up, blends it in. Heavy pressure, light pressure. Here we're starting to get down toward the trunk, so I am going to start working in those side to side brush strokes a bit again. I added just a little bit more white to that. Not too bad. Break that up a little. And let's continue through the rest of the elephant before we get too carried away with the trunk there. We've got some bright little pops, of course, on the eyebrow. Fuzzes out. We've got some brightness there I need to remember. A little bit of a highlight there. Maybe just a bit here on this side. Like I said, just find it. You're not stuck with anything. Absolutely nothing. If you don't like something, layer over it later. We do get a little lighter right there. Kind of fade out there. That lighter spot right there that I told you I wanted to do to separate it from the other part. I believe that this is like the belly area, and then this is like the rump and the back leg. So we don't want to make it just one solid shape and make our elephant look like a just like a gray lump with a trunk. Got some of that lighter color here. Heavy pressure to get that paint off of there. Scumble it out. I got a little extra water on my brush. It's starting to get dry. I'm just going to mix right into my white. Make sure that I keep those colors. I don't want pure white. There we go. But I do want a much lighter color. There we go. And let's do the same thing. I do want more of a solid line here, but I don't want a sharp edge on the inside, so I'm going to scumble that out. Work in the smaller sections so that I can easily get rid of those lines without having it dry. If it dries like that, it's going to be really hard to get rid of. Little matte medium just to keep some crisp edges in our little side to side bit. If you accidentally go over into this area, it's okay, because like I said, we haven't finished that yet. We're gonna come back with our darker value there. So we can cover up anything that gets carried away from us. I'd rather have you not worry about that and go into it than worry about it and have your trunk not turn out the way you want it. So at this point, now that I know where my shadows and my highlights are, I'm not really looking at my reference image anymore, because if I keep looking at my reference image, I might get too reliant on it and really try to force some of the details that I see. I know what parts of the image are important to me at this point, and that's really what I'm going to focus on doing. So I would kind of recommend the same thing for you. Don't be too reliant on your reference image. Take the information that's important to you and then move on. Let's keep going with that color. Plop some down here and then scumble it out. I may still glance at it from time to time just to, you know, get an idea on my values and where they are, but as far as details go, I'm not looking at it for details. But we do have this light value that comes clear up here. I still have quite a bit of paint on here. So again, I'm not using a lot of pressure. I might come in and put down a little blop like that with some pressure, but then I come back with the tip of the brush to scumble it out. And if it gets out of control, if I end up putting too much of this bright color somewhere where I want it darker, I'm not gonna sweat that. I'll just leave it for now, because I'm gonna come back with some darker colors in just a little bit. A little bit too much of a definition there between the lines and the scumbly bit. There we go. All right, let's work on this eyebrow. Of course, we've got our sharper line right there. And then light pressure, we'll kind of pull it this way a bit, barely touching. I think I drew my eye a little different than in the reference image, but to me, I'm looking at it, I can still tell what it is, so I'm not real worried about it. Kind of scrubbing in a little bit of an up and down motion here, because if you look at the reference image, the hide of the elephant, it does seem to have some texture that kind of moves in that type of a direction. And so I kind of want to move that way to keep that illusion. Just like we did on the trunk with the side to side. And I actually forgot to put my darker value in right there. So I'm gonna do that real quick. Again, it's those two colors just into a dark value. Tiny, tiny, tiny hint of white, just so it's not pure black. And I'm gonna get that sharp edge right up against the trunk. Then I think we're ready to move on, start working on a little bit of some details. So for my details, I'm gonna start by doing kind of that polka dotty look that we have on the elephant. I'm not gonna do it quite as much as what's on the image, but I do wanna do it a little bit. So I'm gonna get my dark color. Doesn't matter if it leans brown or blue. Tiny poke of white, just so it's not pure black. Little extra water. Load up my brush with that pretty good. Just mush your brush and it sucks up a lot of it. I'm gonna come in here and I'm just gonna flick. And I'm not worried about where these splatters go. They can go over the entire elephant, it doesn't matter. Mostly we've got a lot of them up here toward the forehead. I'm not worried about any splatters that might be ugly, because ultimately a lot of these are going to be covered. We're not going to have, you know, these splatters just living on their own out here. I'm going to get some down here in the trunk, light and dark side both. And I may end up doing more, but we'll start with this and see how that goes. All right, I'm gonna stick with my 1/2 inch, and now I have some Mars Black, and I want to get my shadow in over here, make sure that this blends in really well, because I'm gonna start working on, you know, finalizing the shadows and highlights, and I feel like I need the black to be done first. So, just get a little of that. And see, it easily covers that chalk, so I'm not worried about the chalk. Just kind of start somewhere near that color and then lighten my pressure so that I can start getting into it. I don't want any hard line there. I want this black to, you know, slowly start engulfing the side of the elephant. So if you need to use your finger to smear it, there we go. Let's get you in tight up here. Lay down that black. I do have a bit of a sharper line right there. But then everything else, I'm going flat, light pressure there. It comes in and I can smear it. Really light pressure there. There. Yeah, that's looking good. Now along the side of the trunk, I want to do it just a little bit different. So let's start right here. I am going to bring it in very similar to how I did it up there. Very light pressure. Kind of smear it a little. But I'm going to kind of smear it in as well. I can even take the tip of my brush, very light pressure. There we go. Just drag a tiny hint of that in, but I want to smear it out. I just want the suggestion of lines. Light pressure. Smear it out and smear it in. Maybe here, as we start to get down a little farther, I can bring those lines in a little bit more, but I still want to smear them. Light pressure there. And now that we have our black in there, we can really tell if our values are correct, if we need to adjust any of them. I don't think he's looking too bad. Let's just finish this part, because the two different blacks and the lines are kind of throwing everything off, I feel like. Just do that really quickly. Since it's already painted black, I don't have to be too overly specific with it. Much better. I think I'm going to bring this in a little farther right here. I don't want to do the black over here yet, because I'm not done with this edge. Okay, I've taken a little bit of a break from this so I could kind of reset my brain, and I feel like this area is just about done. I'm really just going to kind of go through and touch it up a little bit. It's not our focus, so we don't need to put anywhere near as much detail as even what's in the photo there. I think I'm going to go to my Fuzzbert. So this is a number 8 filbert that's just all puffy and really great for scrubbing. Use whatever you have that you're okay scrubbing with. And really all we're going to do is some touch up over here, kind of reshape the edge of the trunk here. So I'm just going to mix up some of my gray. And let's see, maybe right in here. If you do want to go just a little bit more intense with the texture, you know, you could probably come in here and do a little, you know, stippling or something. Just kind of like that, and break it up a little. Use a different brush if that one doesn't do exactly what you need. You know, just kind of experiment with all kinds of different brushes and see what they do. Just get a little bit in there. It's dark, but it doesn't have to be flat and boring. Let's go a little bit lighter. My paint is kind of drying out because I took a good break. It's been maybe about an hour. So real quick, that's something I get asked about so much. How do I keep my paint wet on my palette? Well, the answer is I really don't. My paint dries out just like yours does. The difference is that I try my best to only put out really what I'm going to use. You know, so I don't typically put out a lot of paint. Like my matte medium that I'm using, it's getting pretty thick. It's drying out. So even my matte medium is not, it's not what it was when I was painting earlier. And a lot of times, you know, I'll just put out a little bit of paint, and I may not always show you when I get more paint. So it may just seem like I've got this infinitely wet blob of paint that I'm using. Well, your paint is all drying out. Just put out a little bit. You can always get more. But if you let your paint dry out, then you're just gonna waste it. Unless you take unplanned hour-long breaks like I do sometimes. I feel like I'm pretty happy with this section back here. So let's start working in here. Actually, I'm gonna come up to the forehead first. So, nice pale color. Lighter than what's in there right now, but not quite pure white. Wipe some of that off. I don't want a huge amount of paint. I'm gonna come up in here. It's nice and bright right here. And I'm doing that same type of thing like we did with the 1/2 inch flat, where I kind of will use a little extra pressure to plop down some color and then up onto the scrubby end to kind of, you know, fog it out and force it around. So let me kind of show you here. So I'm gonna plop some down like that up onto the edge of my brush and just kind of scrub it. And my pressure's not very heavy. I'm not using full pressure on this brush. If you want to get rid of some of the canvas texture, either just wet your brush a tiny bit, or I just picked up a little bit of matte medium. See, and that kind of helps smooth that out a little. A little bit more. Yeah, that's starting to look really good. So I'm gonna bring some down here to the edge. I have not finished the area next to the trunk. So I am gonna end up, see, kind of fuzzing that line out a little, because it's more important to me that I get in here the way I need to than it is that I keep a solid line with a dark edge over here. I'm gonna go back and fix this up in a minute. Yeah, I kind of like that. So I'm just lightly scrubbing a bit and then occasionally just kind of zip it over to the side, and it acts like a little bit of a highlight. It's very subtle across that shape, that little bend. Let's continue down here. Let's run a bit right there, and then immediately start kind of scrubbing that out. And take a hint of it that way for a highlight. Very light pressure. See, and I'm just kind of dragging my brush. You might be able to hear Mr. Moon there. He's out there meowing probably meowing at Olaf. I keep him typically locked out of my studio while I'm recording because he bugs. He wants to come in when he's locked out. He wants to go out when he's locked in. Either way, he meows a lot, so it's just easier to keep him locked out. That's looking pretty good. I'm not unhappy with that. See how, again, just like we talked about in the log on the beach painting last week, how I've got the light right next to the dark, that creates a wrinkle, it creates dimension. You don't want to have, you know, a bright white in the middle of nothing and like dark nowhere near light, because that's just going to look like lines. But when I put that bright right next to that dark, we get a wrinkle. And that does go back to the whole thing I was saying about, you know, don't think of this as an elephant. Don't think of this part as a trunk. Think of it as shapes and colors, because those shapes and colors are really what tell the story to say that this is an elephant. It's not you know, drawing a perfect elephant or using the right color of gray. That's very little of it, you know. Focus on shapes and colors, shapes and values, really, and you will have a believable painting. I am really happy with how this is turning out on this trunk here. I don't mind saying I was a little nervous about the trunk because it would be really easy for me to, you know, start out nice and loose like this and just suggesting things, but then end up digging in. Whoa, did you see that? Man, I caught that. Digging in too deep into details and kind of getting lost. And I don't mean getting lost in my painting. I mean losing sight of what it is that I wanted the painting to look like in the first place. But I am super happy with how this is coming. So let's keep going. I'm just loading up with my light color again. I'm just gonna make sure that we're good in here. A little bit of a brighter color right there. I do want a little bit of this brighter color in the trunk. However, I'm gonna wait. I'm not gonna do it with this brush. A little matte medium just to smooth that out a bit. There we go. Almost glazing there. And see, I painted over a lot of those little speckles, but if I want more, I can come back and do them again. I think I'm gonna kind of leave what we have going here the way it is for now. I'm just gonna finish that. Maybe just a hint of that brighter color right in here. I'm just kind of dry brushing there, really. There's very little paint on this brush. Just creating that suggestion of a lighter color there. Really, the techniques that we're using here and the concepts and everything, this is all very similar to the Buddha painting that we did. I knew I said I was going to move on from that color, but I'm just going to kind of glaze right here. There we go. So by glaze, I mean I just picked up a little extra matte medium to make the paint a little bit more transparent so I could put it over top of that. If you're not using matte medium, just maybe a tiny bit of extra water or even just dry brush it. Okay, let's move on and work on this section here along the side of the trunk. Okay, I'm gonna go to my number 8 bright and I'm gonna mix up my dark color. I'm gonna add a little bit of white to it. Oh, maybe not that much. There we go. All right, that'll be good. I think that's a little warmer than what I used before, and that's okay. Little matte medium. I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna tighten up this line, at least, you know, most of the way. Like up here, I might let the trunk start to kind of blend into the face, just right there. But everything else, I'm going to bring a nice tight edge there. Kind of reshape the trunk if I feel like I need to. I feel like my trunk ended up being a little bit more straight down on this side than I wanted. So I pulled it in a little farther at the top, and I'm going to push it in a little farther at the bottom. Okay, I like that shape a lot better. So I'm going back to my Fuzzbert because I'm going to do a little bit of scrubbing again. I just wanted a nice sharp line, that's why I went to that bright. There's no sharp line gonna be got with Fuzzbert. A little bit of white, because I don't want it black right there next to the trunk. I just want it a little bit darker than what's in the reference image. But right now it's kind of black. So there we go. And I'm just gonna lightly scrub that in there. And occasionally, maybe I make it just a little bit lighter than that even. Especially here as we start coming up to the eye. We'll go work on that eye in a minute. A little bit lighter, just get a bit of that texture back. I kind of feel like I want a little bit of lighter color just right here. That's not in my reference image. I don't even care. That's what I want to see. I'm taking that same color I just used. And really, I'm gonna save the detail of the eye for the very last part. So the actual eyeball and the flesh around it, still just playing with the values right there. The values of the skin around the eyes, that is. Okay, up here, let's work on this eyebrow bit. Kind of scrubbing little circles very, very lightly. But I'm still doing that exact same thing that I always tell you about, how hard pressure lays it down. See the little scrubby pressure? How I'm not laying down any paint? So I'll come in and I'll kind of push and then back up onto the tippy toe to just kind of spread it around like that. Going back into that little blop that I just laid. That's really about what I'm doing right now. So that tippy toe to get rid of that line, scumble it around, heavier pressure, scumble it around. Matte medium to smooth it out. I might leave that, finish that up when I come do the eyeball. At this point, if you wanted to flick some more of the little speckles on there, you could do that. I thought about it, maybe I will. I wasn't going to, but now I feel like I want to. So my blue-brown, I have a little extra water on my brush. A little more water. I think that's good. There's the tiniest hint of white in there. I'm gonna be pretty conservative with that. So very light flicks. It's a pretty thin mixture too. It's not as thick or as dark as that first mixture. I think that's good. Just to give you an idea of how light that spray was. So it just kind of helps pull the two layers together a little. Okay, let's finish up the trunk. I'm gonna go to my number 2 round, and I'm really just gonna pick up white. And if it's a little too white once I put it on the canvas, then I'll grab a little bit of my other colors. But I'm gonna start with pure white, just a little bit. And I'm gonna come into here, make sure I have that crisp edge very lightly. And use very light pressure to just get some more little spots in there to really amp up those wrinkles. Don't spend a lot of time here. Don't get too crazy with it. And I am scrubbing with this brush just a little bit. I always have another Fuzzbert in the making, I guess. It's right there on that wrinkle, just to really brighten it. But nothing looks like shocking white, because I'm applying it very thin. If you're using matte medium, I think that will make this part much easier. But if you're not, you will be okay. Just zoom me out there a little bit so you can kind of see the overall effect, how this bright white here is kind of creating a little bit more interest there. And also, you know, sometimes I zoom you out from what I'm doing so that, like I said, you can see the overall effect that's happening, but also to get you kind of used to looking at your painting a bit from a distance. Learning to kind of take the whole thing in to determine how a single brush stroke affected the whole painting is a really valuable thing. Because let's say you're just going to town on this trunk. You're highlighting it and you're really digging it. It's looking so good. You know, each brush stroke it looks exactly the way you wanted it to look as you put it down. And then you finish up and you stand back and you look, and your trunk is so bright white that everything else feels really out of place. So that's another reason I tell you, you need to stand back. You need to, you know, get a little distance, do a little bit, stand back and look at it. And I don't think I'm going to take this bright white all the way to the bottom. That part of the trunk is a little bit more in shadow, I feel like. I am going to get just a hint of pure white with my Fuzzbert, some matte medium, and I'm going to very lightly just blop it there and then scrub that around. It's right here on the brightest part of his forehead. All right, sticking with my number 2 round, and I'm gonna start going in and really detailing the eye. To start, I'm gonna get some black, and I'm gonna fill it in nice and dark. I also have just a little bit of a pure black, kind of in the shadow, right up here. And maybe in some of these little creases, they'll be more effective if you keep one edge really soft and one edge more crisp. That will help you say that's a little bit of a crease, a little bit of a shadow. And I know it's starting to look weird again. but I'm not afraid. Sketch some little shadow lines in there. Want that nice and dark right there so the eyebrow really shows off. All right, that's enough black. Let's do our black or blue brown. Tiny poke of white. And just gonna work on those shadows. Oops, I think I needed a little bit darker than that. There. Now that black doesn't look so out of place anymore. Get rid of all of that chalk. Much better. No more chalk. Make it kind of wobbly. Some of my skin here I think is a little bit too smooth. Our elephant has some choppy, kind of wrinkly skin. Just keep playing with the shape and the color. Remember that you don't have to get this right. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to get it perfect in your first go or in any go, really. You can keep coming back to it. Yeah, I think that's kind of what it was missing, was a little bit of a highlight right here under. In my image, there's not, the eye is really hard to kind of see. It's like a black spot surrounded by wrinkly, dark gray spots. So it's really kind of hard to see what's going on. So rely on yourself quite a bit here. Or other images, if you're using an image for everything else, but like the eye doesn't work, and you need to know what an eye looks like, you can mix and match reference images. I'm just gonna kind of go for it and see what happens. That's looking a little bit better. Yeah, I'm gonna need a new number 2 soon. Because I'm definitely gonna turn this one into a fuzzy number 2. It's getting there. Let's go nice and bright there. I just picked up a little point of white. It's getting there slowly. But like I said, the eye is the focal point, so you want to take your time. Don't rush through the eye. But I like to save things like the eye, you know, the parts where you really put the emphasis, the bright points, the dark points, the interesting points. I like to do them last because I think I said this last week when we were doing the beach scene. It kind of feels like a reward to me, you know, because that's really where you see everything kind of come together. Things fall into place. You can go from a painting that has just looked weird the whole time you were painting it to suddenly it looks exactly like what you've been wanting the whole time. And it's all because you just put the finishing touches on. And I think that feels, you know, really rewarding. I'm just trying to get a slightly darker color there. Struggling with it a little because I have so much white on my brush. There we go. And we'll go back with a different color at the top there. Okay, I just looked at my reference image and really we have the skin kind of comes down like this here. So let's try that because I'm not completely happy with what's happening in here. That might be better. Just dabbing a hint of that white in there. I'm going to put just a little bit of some bright white right next to the black part. And then highlight at the top of the eye to kind of say that the eyelid is hanging down over it a bit. Now he looks sleepy. So maybe I don't want him to be that sleepy. I don't think it's looking too bad. There is a change I'm going to make to the eyelid in just a minute, but I'm going to lighten this up just a hint right here next to the eye. Get my dark color again. We're going to fix up the part so he doesn't look like he's fallen asleep. So I'm going to take that over top. I'll probably pick up a little bit of that white, and that's okay. Just give us a bit of a shadow in there. A little bit of white. Reinstate that highlight right there to say that's where his eyelid hangs over and everything else is shadow under it. Okay, there are a couple touch-ups I want to make, but I'm going to let this dry completely and then we'll come back and make them and I think we'll be about done. Okay, going back to my Fuzzbert, gonna get my dark color, just a bit of it. In fact, I'm going to use a little matte medium to thin it down. All right. And I'm just going to lightly touch up some of my shadows, just barely in there. No heavy pressure. So if there's anything where your highlights you felt like were too aggressive, take it back a bit with this. I don't think I need much more than that up here. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just do a similar thing on the eye. think that will help pull it together a little bit more. Just right here. I don't want to make him look sad though. Just cleaning up some edges. And I want to bring a bit of a shadow from here. Down a bit there. That's looking much better. I'm much happier with that. All right, last part, back to my 1/2 inch and my black. Let's fill all of this in, clean up that edge, and then we can sign it and call it done. I'm quite happy with my elephant. You know, for not really having much of a plan or an idea about how exactly I was going to do the elephant, because you guys watched me do it for the first time, I'm pretty happy with him. I've been challenging myself lately because I usually will work in pieces. You know, when I have an idea for a painting for you guys, I'll kind of work on one piece of it. And if I'm happy with it, then I'll move on and work on a different piece. But a lot of times I never complete the painting on one canvas. You know, I have like 20 canvases with different parts completed on it. I'm just smoothing that right there with my finger a little bit, because I feel like we don't need that sharp of a line right there at the bottom. I feel like maybe right here too, we have that shadow. But yeah, I didn't do that with this one at all. I just hit record and started painting. So I'm pretty happy with it. Okay, before we finish up, I'm just gonna touch up in here. It just kind of looks like a gray to me, not real interesting. And I'm gonna bring a little bit more light into the eye, and then we're done. A fairly light color. It's a little lighter than that. Just kind of scumble it, get some texture in there. Not trying to get it real smooth. Let's go even just a little bit lighter, just for a tiny, tiny bit. That was a little too light, but there we go. Let's go back in and darken that up, just to make sure we have a good shadow. It's looking better though. That's looking a little bit more like what I wanted. Just some of that dark color here on this side though, just to make sure that there's a definition between the body and the face, at least up toward the top. much better. Let's just put a little bit of that light-ish color back in here, now that we have that crisp line. There. I need to get the eye. I need it to have a pretty good highlight. Pretty light highlight. Just scribbling some of that light color in. I know there's nowhere near this much light in the eye on the reference image, but well, that's part of the great thing about being an artist is you can change it. You're not a photocopy machine, you're an artist. So you can make it however you want it. I think it's getting there. Almost. I can see that I just want to kind of get it nice and bright right here. Make sure you keep standing back to look at it. You can't tell if it looks the way you want it while you're right in front of it. Just touch up some of those shadows where maybe my light got a little aggressive. And I'm just introducing some extra texture. Just kind of nudging the color in here and there. I think that's looking much better. Okay, I think that is just about right. Just a bit more of a highlight here, and then I'm going to stand back, look at it, and I'm probably going to call it done.